For over 70 years, a second government has breathed beneath the surface of the first. It does not hold elections. It does not issue press releases. It operates in the gray space, a vacuum of accountability where the only currency is information, and the only rule is plausible deniability. We were told the American intelligence community was a shield, a silent sentinel designed to keep the world's chaos from our doorstep. But shields, when held too long in the dark, begin to hide as much as they protect. For decades, the machine was invisible, not because it didn't exist, but because it was designed to be a ghost in the room. Decisions that altered the fate of continents were made in wood-paneled rooms, whispered by men whose names will never appear in a history book. But the ghost is beginning to materialize. This week, the silence didn't just break, it fractured. What we are seeing isn't a single leak or a sudden scandal. It is something far more dangerous to the status quo. It is a pattern. Across multiple reports, fragments began to surface. Individually harmless. Together, unsettling. A renewed focus on intelligence presence in Latin America. Internal disputes over unexplained injuries suffered by personnel. Lawmakers openly questioning intelligence conclusions once considered final. This is not chaos. This is friction. To understand the present, we must acknowledge the ghosts of the past. The architecture of modern intelligence was built on the foundations of the Cold War. It was a time when the world was binary and the stakes were existential. But, the war never truly ended. It simply evolved. The shadows that once stretched across Berlin have moved to the digital clouds and the dense jungles of the South. Honestly, we are still using a 20th century machine to navigate a 21st century crisis. Consider the cost of a secret. Every classified document is a brick in a wall between the state and the people it serves. When that wall grows too high, the state loses its pulse. And now, we are seeing the consequences of that isolation. Let us look at the map. Specifically the Southern Hemisphere, Venezuela, a nation defined by its vast oil reserves, its proximity to American shores, and its long, turbulent history of defiance. For years, the narrative was one of sanctions and diplomatic pressure, public-facing, predictable. But beneath the surface, the gears are shifting. Internal documents suggest a massive, unacknowledged expansion of the intelligence footprint in the region. We are not talking about diplomats. We are talking about planners, strategists, shadow assets who operate in the periphery of international law. Intelligence doesn't just linger. It terraforms. It creates the conditions for its own necessity. And as the presence grows, the line between watching a revolution and engineering one becomes a blur that even the most seasoned lawmakers can no longer ignore. But the reach of the machine is not limited to geography. It has moved into the very air we breathe. Havana syndrome. It started as a medical anomaly, a strange set of symptoms, headaches, vertigo, cognitive fog, suffered by diplomats and spies. For years, the official line was a shrug of the shoulders, a mystery, perhaps a psychogenic event. In other words, it was all in their heads. Then a report was released claiming that external involvement was unlikely. No foreign weapon, no directed energy. Case closed. But the victims felt abandoned. When an intelligence organization begins to doubt the injuries of its own officers, the rot is no longer external. It is institutional. Is it a cover-up to avoid a confrontation? Or is it a failure of science? Either way, the message to those in the field is clear. You are protected until your protection becomes inconvenient. So, we've entered the age of the glass house. In this digital era, the definition of a secret has, well, changed. We live in an ocean of data where every keystroke is a footprint and every whisper is a permanent record. Surveillance isn't just a tool of war anymore, it's become the fabric of our daily lives. We're being watched, not by eyes, but by algorithms that honestly predict our next move before we even make it. This is the new frontier, the conquest of the human mind through data. They don't need to break down your door if they can influence the thoughts you have before you even reach for the handle. These days, intelligence agencies are investing billions in predictive analytics and artificial intelligence. They're not just reacting to events, they're actually trying to simulate the future. They build digital twins of entire populations to test how a certain piece of information or a sudden economic shock will ripple through a society. It's the ultimate form of social engineering, conducted in the dark, without a single vote being cast. But as the technology grows more sophisticated, the human element becomes more volatile. Every machine has a limit. Every system has a breaking point where the complexity becomes its own enemy. We are seeing that limit reached in real time. These cracks are being widened by individuals who once believed in the mission but can no longer reconcile the reality with the rhetoric. Former insiders describe a culture where the mission justifies the means, and where the means are increasingly disconnected from the values of a free society. They tell us of programs that exist without congressional oversight, of budgets that disappear into the black, of alliances with regimes that stand against everything we claim to represent. It is a world of mirrors, where an enemy today is an asset tomorrow, and where the only constant is the preservation of the agency itself. The weight of 70 years of secrets is beginning to crush the foundation. A democracy cannot function in the dark, and an intelligence agency cannot function without the consent of the governed. When assessments are recalled, when reports are challenged by the very lawmakers who commission them, when the unseen is finally noticed, the system reveals its stress. The tension between security and liberty will only tighten. We are told we must choose one or the other. But history teaches us that when you sacrifice liberty for security, you usually end up losing both. The shadows have not disappeared, they are just shifting, moving under the light of a new, skeptical scrutiny. Think of the massive server farms, just humming away in the desert, processing billions of private conversations every single hour. Think of the analysts sitting in windowless rooms, quietly deciding which world leader stays and which one falls. This, right here, is the reality of the silent state. It's a machine that never sleeps, never forgets, and honestly, rarely forgives. But even the most powerful machine out there needs a source of energy. And for the intelligence community, that energy is, well, the silence of the public. Once that silence is broken, the machine starts to sputter. The eyes of the public are finally, adjusting to the dark. They're looking at the architects of the silent state and asking, at what point does the protection become the threat? The answer is not found in a classified briefing. It's found honestly, in the courage to look at the machine for what it is. A tool that has grown too powerful for its own creators. A ghost that has stayed in the room for far too long. The silence is over, the pattern is clear, and the conversation is just beginning. Trust, once fractured, does not repair quietly. It requires a total reckoning, a stripping away of the masks, a return to the light. Because in the end, the greatest intelligence a nation can possess is not found in a satellite feed or a decrypted cable. It is found in the truth. And the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. The shadows are receding. The question is, are we prepared for what the light will reveal?